Hello ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar, which is brought to you by sharedserviceslink.com and sponsored by Airplan International. We're going to be looking today at the NEC shared services story, in particular how they freed up the time of their executive team through T&E improvements. So presenting the lineup for today, my name is Susie West and I'm the founder and CEO at sharedserviceslink.com, and I will be hosting today's session. I'm very pleased to be presenting as our two speakers, John Dickens, who is the Shared Services Centre Manager at NEC. He's been there for 4 years now, and before that was involved in shared services at Global Crossing for 8 years. And before that was working at Wang in their shared services operation, which then became Getronics. John's been in shared services now for 17 years. And also we have with John, Rachel Burgess, who's Head of Account Management at Airplan International. And Rachel's been at Airplan International for 12 years now in a number of senior roles. And before that, she's gathered extensive experience in the airline industry. So we've got a lot of knowledge and expertise to be sharing with you today. You, of course, do have a significant role to play today, which is to really think hard about the questions that you would like to have answered, and make sure that you put those questions to me throughout the course of the 50 minutes of presentation. We have 10 minutes at the end to take your questions. I will be putting your questions to our experts, and you will be getting the answers then. In terms of context for today, we all know that manual T&E can be very costly indeed, not only because of the extensive and fiddly and cumbersome touch points that occur not just within the shared services organisation but out in the business. And obviously that can be a huge cost to the business, but also because of the lack of control when something isn't systematic and automated, where people out in the business can use suppliers that aren't preferred, and that you have specific arrangements with suppliers and travel partners. And also, of course, there's the opportunity when the process isn't systematic and automated for the occasional abuse of the system, which obviously introduces risk to the business. So I'm really pleased that this next 50 minutes is going to be a deep dive into the NEC story. But just before we go into the NEC story, I'd just like to run the first poll. We have 2 polls today, just to gauge really the level of maturity as far as your adoption is concerned. So coming up on your screen now, to what degree do you have a consolidated program in place to manage your T&E program, i.e. a single TMC or card provider? Would you say it's completely in place? You have a completely consolidated program? In the main, partially, or not at all? So as you well know, I'm sure some of you have been on our webinars before, we do like to get north of 70% of you participating. There's just a single answer here to that question. To what degree do you have a consolidated program in place to manage your T&E program, i.e. a single TMC or card provider? Completely, in the main, partially, or not at all. Only 48% of you responded. If you haven't done so, please do so. I will be closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. Okay, we were at 63% of you responding. Let's have a look at the results coming up on your screen now. So pretty much an even spread there, with just shy of a quarter of you feeling that you have a completely consolidated program, 30% in the main, 30% partially, and around 20% not at all. So an interesting mix, but I'm sure we've got something for everyone on this webinar today. So with that, I'd now like to introduce our first presenter, please. Over to you, please, Rachel.
Thank you, Susie, and good afternoon, everyone. Airplan are delighted to be involved in this afternoon's webinar. I will be shortly handing over to John Dickens, Shared Service Manager at NEC, one of our long-standing customers, who will be telling us about their how their shared services team freed up time and saved money by improving their T&E processes. Before I do that, I just wanted to share a little bit of background on Airplan, who we are and what we do. So Airplan have been around for about 23 years. 12 of these years I've actually been here, so I've seen the company grow quite significantly. We are currently #1 in Germany, Austria and Switzerland, and we are #2 in Europe and 3rd in the world. We basically specialize in payment solutions and analysis for T&E. This is basically all we do, so we really have to make sure we do it well. We now have products in 60 countries. We're a member of Visa, MasterCard and UATP. Our headquarters are in Germany and we're owned by Lufthansa. And the next slide will basically just show you where we are at the moment in the world. So John will be talking about the before and after at NEC and how they have streamlined their processes, moving from a very manual solution to a much more efficient way of doing things, and where we actually facilitate with this. So what are some of the challenges that we, Airplus, as a payment provider, try to resolve for companies like NEC? Well, these include, for example, lots of manual processes to manage the whole T&E process, too many invoices and too much time spent on reconciliation, lack of visibility on what travellers are actually spending and where they're actually spending it, poor adherence to travel policy, overall lack of data to have meaningful conversations with suppliers, and finally, unhappy travellers, too much time spent by them doing their expenses, then a delay in getting paid, and then having too much burden on their own personal cards. So where exactly does Airplus and the Airplus offering fit into the whole process? Well, all T&E costs can be booked on either our corporate cards, our centralized payment solution, the company account, or our virtual payment solution, which is actually part of the company account. All this data then can be, from these products, can then be fed into our online reporting tool, the Information Manager. So all these products will help companies have full visibility and insight into their T&E spend, resulting in saving costs through improved travel compliance, through streamlined processes, and as a result, reduced administration. And finally, help improve traveller satisfaction, which is always a good thing. I think you'll agree. So now I'd like to hand over to John Dickens from NEC. NEC have been an Airplus customer since 2003, with Airplus company accounts set up in the UK, Germany, France, and Italy. In the UK, they also utilise a Euro account, and they have monthly CSV files set up to feed into SAP, helping them save time and money with their processes. So over to you, John.
Thank you, Rachel. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for sparing the time to listen to our story. Hopefully it will be insightful and hopefully set us a few light bulbs on for those that are looking at full automation of this process. What I'm going to do is take you through, I hate to use the word journey, but effectively our complete pre to finish operation. Here in front of you can see the agenda. Before I go through this, just to give you some substance as to what NEC is. NEC is a HQ-based operation in London, looking after a number of affiliates throughout Europe, and it's a subsidiary of NEC Corporation of Japan. From a point of view of scale and size, in Japan we're absolutely enormous, but in Europe we're only about 2,500 people. Similarly in America we're roughly the same size. In Japan we're about 180,000 people, so from a point of view of an organisation we're actually probably in the top 750 in size in the world, but from a point of view of looking at automation across the whole P2P piece, it's quite an exciting time for us because effectively we believe that with the tools that are now available, even those at the smaller, medium end can take advantage of these tools. So that gives you an idea of what NEC is like. As I say, we'll go into more detail looking through the agenda, so mapping out how it looked before we took the automation route, what our intended landscape was intended to be, and hopefully we can put some substance to that and give you an indication as to where we are now. How we selected the key processes and therefore the key suppliers, a little more detail as to the deployment process and how we've got to where we've got to, so a little more actuals for you to actually have a look at. And then focusing on how we've taken the base deployment and continue to add to that. And then we'll summarise with some hard facts as to what we learned, what we have advice to you, etc., etc. So before automation, we were very, very fragmented. Each country, being a Japanese organisation, was very independent and autonomous. We had manual systems and operations in every single one of those countries. We operate in what they call a JSOX environment, so Sarbanes-Oxley with a Japanese twist. Anybody that's been involved with that will know that's probably SOX times 10. So it's actually very high in governance, and in a manual environment that was setting a number of challenges. VAT reclaim was tough for us. Again, being manual, in the UK alone we had difficulties justifying full HMRC reclaim, simply because our manual documentation wasn't up to, fit for purpose. The key issue though was manual processing. It's very tedious. We couldn't see any value in that. We only had around about 72 people working across Europe on accounting, and yet in each of these territories somebody somewhere was having the boring task of putting these things into our SAP system. I've touched on VAT, so the key element, and certainly the key element for this presentation, is the long approval cycle time. The way we are structured and our workflows and our approval flows were very much biased towards travel in particular being approved by senior Japanese personnel. Expenses reclaims had different workflows, but invariably that involved reporting to your line manager, again, more often than not was going to be Japanese, and they often weren't here. What that meant was basically we had a real problem in getting people to work smartly. Flights were being left to the last minute, expenses were being processed and approved way beyond the time when people needed the money, and it was all to do with the fact that the management charge was too expensive. What we were looking for was a solution that kept that to the minimum. The other thing was more strategic. We had no idea. We spend around about 6 million on T&E, and I think that number's be up to around about 7 or 8 now, given the broader landscape that we now look after. And we had no real idea of where we were spending that money. We had SAP that gave us a GL account of where it had gone to, but it didn't provide the strategic data necessary for our procurement guys to actually make smarter decisions. And as I touched on earlier, SOX compliance was an issue. Many people failing the tough criteria set by our Japanese parent. So looking at the before automation costings, this was relatively easy for us because I think when we benchmarked ourselves way in the day back in 2008, it was quite clear to us that given the level of automation that was available, we were probably worst in class. And using the HC Kearney study from that period, we used the data that they had produced and mapped that against our processing numbers. And it was quite a horrific figure as to how much downtime we were losing. So a lot of this was soft. There weren't physically $500,000 worth of savings, but it was what was costing us for management and senior personnel to be getting involved and touching these processes far too many times. Expense claims in particular, I'll draw your attention to the numbers because at the end you'll see the impact of viewing this automation and how that's been reduced significantly by making people change their approach to how we use the system. The travel bookings and plannings are roughly around about the same levels, but the expense claims, as you can see, were sub 10,000, but still relatively significant from the point of view of a small organisation like ourselves. So let's look at the landscape before we moved into an automated environment. We've touched on a few. This notion of touching, as most people in shared services will appreciate, is key for us. As I say, it depends who touches it as to how much work is involved in it. And far too often the same managers would be the obstacle. This one is a cost, but two is an emotional thing. A lot of people were disengaged from the process, didn't enjoy T&E and found it as a painful exercise, and that was one thing that we wanted to actually alleviate. UK alone, we had 13 different Excel, printed handsheets, whatever you want to call them, but extremely manual, brought about by a number of different NEC entities in the UK coming together and everybody never sacrificing their existing paperwork. Key for us was processing time. We had frequent payment runs, so we had weekly payment runs, and a little later in this presentation I'll elaborate on why we've kept those weekly payment runs, because it actually supports what we're trying to do. But the frequent payment runs that we had were to support the fact that everything was a panic. People were pressing us to make emergency payments, their credit card bills had come in, etc., etc. And just the whole process time from I have a desire to travel or I'm required to travel through to reclaiming your money was extremely painful. We had 3 separate processes, each one independently manual, each requiring different sign-off, etc., etc. So I think from this landscape, it's quite clear to see that we were very much worse in class. One thing that was particularly obstructive was the fact that we were constrained by office hours. People needed to be in the building during a certain period, and if there wasn't physical sign-off, it didn't happen. Central bookers were doing their own thing. They were as bad as rogue spending as anybody else, which was a challenge. We wanted to bring those in and lever off of their experience and their ability to control. And by providing them with a tool, we felt that we could actually do that. But the key thing from a finance perspective, which as a stakeholder I came from, was that we had some poor chap who basically spent all his working day just typing these things into SAP for no particular return. And that was replicated in our countries. In small countries like Poland, for example, that role fell to the financial controller. There's only about 2 in the finance team there. And that's too expensive an operation to actually do that on a manual basis. So our shopping list and our wish list, our desired and our current state is on the right-hand side here. We wanted it to be very much a self-service tool. We wanted people to go in, use it at their leisure at times that suited them, and what we wanted to do was to deploy one standard methodology. So what that required was for us to engage with a number of different stakeholders, HR who owned the travel policies, IT that could support the various interfaces that we wanted to lever off of, and also procurement who were going to help us source the necessary suppliers to make this happen. With one standard methodology, we could then move forward to tailoring. So on an 80-20 basis, the usual rule for shared services, we were looking to standardize the process, but bring a local flavor to it so that people felt that it was actually fit for purpose in their own local territory. We used it to change the travel policy in two ways. One, we issued an edict, which was the General Travel Directive, which basically gave a broad overview as to what was possible and where the constraints were. But each individual country was allowed to adopt the locality, so for argument's sake, per diems, travel allowances, these all differ, and what you can and cannot claim and what you can process is differing. And we needed to actually ensure that the system could cope with that. We wanted to change the expense processing culture. As I say, it was all one mad panic. And what we wanted people to move was to actually build claims through the period and actually use and submit less claims. We felt that would bring the necessary output that we were looking for, which was to involve the managers less and less. We've got there that we wanted one system to support 3 processes. The fact is it's 4. The tool also enables us to use sanctioned travel to process and request cash advances in certain territories. It's not for everybody, so we switch it off in some and not in others. What we did want to do is ensure that it was available 24/7, 365. So again, what we were looking for is something that we weren't hosting. So we want to outside suppliers who provide this on that kind of availability. The use of central bookers has changed. Our target was to disengage certain people who were being lazy and just chucking these things at central bookers for the sake of it. We wanted to engage more the engineering front and also our sales guys to be a little more self-sufficient. Automating SAP entry, so we were looking for something that would directly export into our SAP ERP system. The same export also enables us to actually map that and interface to any other ERP system. And by having a certified solution, we felt that would make VAT reclaim a lot more plausible in our various territories. Single sign-on, digital audit trail, etc., the usual things. Like I say, it was part of one of 3 solutions that we were looking to deploy, all of which were levering off of the ability of people to access from multiple media, most people access by mobile, etc. But basically it means that they can actually access and use these systems at times to suit them. Okay, so the key drivers from the point of view of the selection process, again, we've touched on 24/7, 365. The configurable to cope with local requirements was important. We wanted this to be available to everybody in local language. The underlying currency in the system is euro, our reporting currency is euro. We effectively have 2 configurations, one of which is in sterling for the UK-based personnel, but the rest is euro for the rest of Europe. But what we wanted to do was not ramrod a product that worked for UK into our subsidiaries and affiliates. So it was very important for us to ensure that we could actually configure it in local language, address the need for local policies, etc., etc. And we spent a little more time than probably was expected originally to do that, but that ensured that we actually had people's buy-in from a usage point of view. Simplification is the current buzzword in shared services, and that was very much what we were looking to do. We wanted people to be able to go in, get out, and do what they needed to do. This was very important from the point of view of senior management as well. They were fed up with being pointed out as being the main obstacles, etc. There's a trade-off here in that what we wanted to do was make it mandatory to use these systems, and the only way we could do that was to actually improve the choice and the content in the system. So there was a responsibility on us to actually work on the feeds that go into these tools to ensure that when people were selecting travel and buying travel, that there was enough choice there to make that relevant for them. Turnaround times have been significantly improved, undoubtedly. As I say, a manager can be anywhere in the world and authorize both travel and expense. The turnaround times have reduced significantly. Rather than having to wait for your manager to return from Japan, he can authorize that 2 seconds after receiving it on his mobile in Japan. We also wanted to change behavior. We were looking for a tool that would actually allow us to buy flights and centrally post those to a lodge card, hence the connection with AirPlus. Our logic being that if we could remove the lumpy items from their expense claims, they'd be more inclined to submit claims over a monthly period rather than event-driven. So again, it was about changing behaviors. We also wanted to build something that was in sync with our desire to scale out. We have a responsibility now for EMEA rather than just Europe, and we keep adding on every time we move somebody into SAP. We are currently looking at our office in Nottingham, and all 3 components of our P2P processes that have been automated, we can pretty much deploy in days and weeks rather than months, simply because we can scale up on these tools and solutions. For everybody, it's one tool. The login is the same, the access is the same, and people can access from their own PCs. As I say, it's a hosted solution that we're not responsible for. So this is the architecture of what we were attempting to build, and what we were trying to do was keep it as simple as possible. We effectively wanted one instance of the following. So basically what we were trying to do was to lace up an interface with our key component tools. So our HR system needed to supply data of the individuals, their profiles, their accounting data, etc., into the online booking tool, make their selections, and then that would then interface with the TMC, who could then make their own interface out to AirPlus once the bookings have been made. As you can see, the idea here critically was to ensure that the accounting data and the workflow was supported and was being pulled through. The key here was to ensure that the online booking tool and the payment mechanisms were able to export to ERP without any manual intervention. So looking at the deployment processes and getting more into the nitty-gritty on how this actually physically works, the first slide that we've got here literally looks at the one instance of, and this was us trying to build the UK template, and what you can see is a number of selection criteria as to expense types. Those expense types were defined by the business, and sitting behind those is a requirement to ensure that each of these are captured both at a reporting level in the online booking tool, but also to actually interface into SAP. Okay. Once you've got your expense types defined, then what we were then required to do was to complete a VAT template. And what this was doing was driving the rules for the export file. Against each of the expense types that we have listed here, you can see on the right-hand side a list of rules that dictate what the habit needed to be or the drive needs to be, depending on whether there was a tax receipt or no receipt. The most complicated of these was in respect of Italy, where also we had an invoice line, where there was an invoice present, etc., etc. And the responsibility for building this and maintaining this is in the centre. Our shared service centre is very, very small. What we deploy is we deploy the tools locally and we manage these from the centre. So all changes to the chart of accounts, the GL configurations, the updating of the template is maintained centrally. We don't require anybody locally to have knowledge on how to build these systems. We just want people in situ to actually use them. So this is how, as I say, we created the export file. The next element was to define the workflows. We have a very complicated system because we have different sides of operation. In Germany, France, UK, we have quite a number of employees. In little territories like Poland, we only have 8. In Spain, we have 40, and they have different requirements, and they wanted to do it in different ways. In front of you is an example. I think this is probably our UK structure. And here you can see 3 lines of workflow definitions that we've actually had to build into the system. So the first level is in respect of travel booking. And again, you can see there are 3 component parts: domestic not involving overnight stay, involving overnight stay, and airfare, etc. The point of this document is really to illustrate that we have many combinations of situations which drive different workflows, and these are configurable in the online booking tool. The middle section is out of policy, so we operate a travel 2.0 kind of methodology for our travel, and what that means is effectively once somebody has their trip approved, they can go shopping, and they can go shopping up to a value level that's embedded in the online booking tool. If the selected option is outside of that parameter, then it routes back to the designated individuals you see here for a further assessment and confirmation as to whether that can be booked. So it's with open eyes, but it's to a degree a bit like Amazon for business, in that what is presented to them is very much a guilt-driven solution, whereby effectively people are being invited to select and make selections, but in the knowledge that we can see what they selected against what they didn't select. We run reports on that. We just make sure there's a sanity check. But to be fair, what we're trying to do is treat people like adults. We provide them with the content to make the right choice. We don't expect them to pick the cheapest and then have to travel 3 days to actually make it work, etc., etc. It's got to be practical. Here you can see a value threshold that we've actually put in for expenses. In France, we have both the value threshold and we also have a multi-level, so it goes to 2 or 3 different managers. Most territories, it just goes to one person as defined by the rules. Okay. Within the tool, we can also configure some control points. So all of our expense types have their own unique forms. These forms we can actually then tailor to ensure that mandatory data is collected, i.e. it could be the vendor, it could be the city, it could be whatever you want to do. So we can actually ensure that these documents are populated. This front-end element is a big sell for us. We don't apologise for the fact that we're requiring more information at the front end, because with that data and the power of the reporting tools that we use, both in respect of our online booking tool solution, our TMC, and also the Airplus solution, we can then use that to drive better spending. So we don't necessarily have the sheer physical mass to do an airport or an airline deal, etc., etc. But hotels and other spend, we can start controlling by virtue of the data we've collected. Value thresholds, things like requiring an explanation or a comment if it's above a certain level. We do that for taxis across Europe. Receipt requirements in France, absolutely mandatory. There's no exception. In those territories, we've allowed people to be exempt from receipt if they can provide a satisfactory comment, and that requires more accountability and responsibility from the actual approving manager to approve, but again, that's part of the deployment. Entertainment is very strong for us. We've broken that into 3 component parts. Everything on that form is mandatory. It's the most emotive of issues, and as I say, it's one of the key ones that we use as a control. And car mileage, we have various different options for that. Indeed, in Poland, they have to get pre-trip approval to go in their car or to anywhere. So highly configurable, but what we have is the ability to impose the rules as per each country. So the technical infrastructure, and this is the solution that we actually have gone with. The HR system was already in situ, Cezanne. Cezanne passes to Concur the individual's profile, so the company they work for, the business area, the cost center, etc. Concur lifts that. It uses it to provide the export for expenses. It also uses it to actually send data through to BCD to complete travel booking. And BCD then export that same data through to Airplus. And that's quite critical because the Airplus bills now become a lot more dynamic from just simply being a record of what has been spent. The Airplus bill itself now includes a significant amount of data, including the approval numbers, so that we can actually do a full reconciliation and individual control to ensure compliance is seen. By virtue of the exports from Concur and from Airplus, we have nobody making any manual postings into our ERP system. So today, what's the user experience like? The self-service tool is available 24/7, 365, and people enjoy that. Initial feedback from every country we went live in was a lot of noise and a lot of disdain from our sales and engineering community that basically sat around and said it was too front-ended, they were too busy doing the thing they did, and they didn't want to use it. These same people are the guys that come back a month later and say, do you know what, I was wrong, this really suits what I do. And where it works for us is that we do have engineering support. They do get calls out on a Sunday, and the managers that look after them know that if they just leave their phone on, if they get a request, somebody could be booking flights on a Sunday and be at their customer destination the following day. This is very important for us. Everything is customized to the country laws, travel policies, and language. We use people in situ to help us do that. So in essence, what we've got in country is what's been built by the local community, and we're quite proud of that. As we said at the outset, we don't want to be funding these flights, and in due course we won't be funding hotels. We've moved to HRS content for hotels. We are now therefore using cards to prepay some of the hot deals, some of the deposits, and now that we've got that culture in place and we're starting to look at the data and we're comfortable with the fact that people are still buying smartly, the next stage for us is to actually start paying up front for using the cards so that these big lumpy items can come out of people's own funding responsibilities. And therefore, again, the value of what's being claimed will reduce, and therefore the number of volume of claims can be reduced. The trade-off we touched earlier is choice and content. When we operated with an individual country TMC, we would phone up that TMC, they would give us 2 or 3 flights, and that would be it. We're using these online booking tools, encourage people to widen their search criteria, etc., etc. We can then get people choosing from 150, 200 flights. With the HRS content, we've got 250, 275,000 properties to choose from hotel-wise. That enables people to believe that they're making the right choice for themselves and to suit their own profile. That's really important to get adoption. The other one for that is turnaround times. With mobile functionality, our senior management in particular fully endorse this, and we've really gone from sort of like famine to feast. The best qualification I can give for this is that the CEO of this company was based in Japan, had downloaded the mobile application, and then was extremely pleased to send me an email to say that within 3 seconds of receiving it, he'd approved it, and this is a fantastic tool, can we get it out to everybody? Once that happens, you don't really need to sell it too often. So from that point of view, we have got a mandate to go wherever we got SAP. As I say, we're still doing probably around about 1 or 2 a quarter at the moment. From a support point of view, we manage that from the middle. We require no intelligence in country. We work with 1 instance of Concur, 1 instance of Airplus, 1 instance of BCD. The BCD operation is a shared service structured operation in Antwerp. That works for us because we actually have nobody in Belgium booking. So all of our bookings are VAT-free. As I say, it makes life a lot simpler for us. We have 1 account management relationship. We have 2 accounts, and those 2 accounts manifest themselves in Airplus bills that we just load into our system. The project is very much about ongoing development. The initial scope was deployed within the timescale of 18 months. I think our payback was more like 6 or 7 months for other reasons way outside in some of our softer options. The mandate here is that everybody that is getting migrated into, and we are very aggressive on our centralization at the minute, but everybody that comes into SAP now gets this as a tool. It's a prerequisite. We also have people that aren't yet here, like in South Africa, asking us when can they go into it. So it's a tool that really is a top priority for many of our organizations to offer them the control functions. We've spent a lot of time revisiting our policies, revisiting our workflows, et cetera, and we've changed them again. What we deployed isn't the same as we've got now. We tweak them, we keep revisiting to make sure they're fit for purpose. The tool enables us to communicate. We use it to actually put messages up. We have the ability of Concur to put messages into the system, BCD into the system. It really is interactive, and certainly by using some of the sundry tools like TripIt, etc., there's a lot more content that can be done even once you book the products and the bookings. Salesforce Connect Series is very good for us. We were very good at doing measuring how much we spent on existing customers, but pretty poor in actually understanding how much we were spending on expenses relating to possibilities and prospects. The Salesforce Connect that's been introduced with Concur now allows us to capture that data and re-export it back to Salesforce. So Salesforce is picking up that data and offers us the ability to manage those projects a lot better. We're just moving to project accounting. We knew it was coming. We have been operating in an internal order environment for our SAP. Both of these options of WPS codes and internal orders we built into the system 3-4 years ago in expectation of it arriving. So again, it was built for scalability at the outset. We've used it to change reporting lines. I think a lot of organizations found that it was too complicated. The tool does simplify it, so we've achieved a lot in that area. We also do, outside of our SAP environment, we have an operation in Hilversum, our head office operation in Hilversum for one of our divisions. The divisions are being migrated into our operation, but this headquarters operation is not. Nothing really changes. All that happens is rather than having the export file interfacing into SAP, it will be mapped and interfaced into their IFS environment. Nothing really fundamentally changes, and that's deliberate. We have become much more customer focused. We now look a lot more proactively at travel. What can we do to improve it, and how do we increase enjoyment? And enjoyment is important. We do go out regularly to our client base and actually ask them, is it still working? Are you actually struggling with anything? What could be changed, etc., etc. We're quite lucky in that Concur themselves regularly release on a monthly basis improvements to the system. Because we are one of the very few that have adopted this complete pan-European TNE, a lot of these changes do involve some of the recommendations that we make, and again, that's quite important for us. Okay, so the key for us is invariably reporting. What was important for us and became even more important is the fact that we actually are now able to triangulate the data that's presented to us. Concur, because it runs on a Cognos engine, pretty much everything that's recorded in any cell in that tool can be listed and reported on. It certainly requires a lot of cognos experience and understanding, but again, there's training that goes with that enables us to be extremely proactive in that regard. BCD, as any TMC, good TMC will provide you with a welter of information regarding the flight data. To be fair, it's limited in isolation, only really works once we triangulate it, but again, it's an important player for us because Concur doesn't always have the data. We operate a very open policy where we're encouraging everybody to do self-service, but there are situations like group bookings, multiple travellers, multiple legs, where actually it's a lot simpler to actually just contact BCD direct. They still have to go through the process of securing their authorization number, their approval number, but BCD will only act with that number in hand. But because of the price differential, if there's more than one person travelling, it's just as easy to make a telephone booking. That data doesn't always appear in Concur from the point of view of that booking. So as I say, we use it to triangulate. And this is where AirPlus' role has completely changed. As I say, rather than being a record of fact, everything that's obviously paid for via BCD is on that card. We can check it to ensure approval numbers are there. If they're not there, we can push back. But what we also do is that because we're trying to run this independently and trying to relieve the operations of work they don't need to do, is that we have situations whereby we provide monthly accruals and we only bill out to our territories once a quarter. It's never contested, it's a statement of fact, and it's a service that we provide deliberately to ease their burden. So, but the key here is the triangulation of that data. Here is the strategic data, which is now allowing our procurement guys to buy a lot better. Okay, so we're going to very quickly go through some of the reporting facets just to show you how these things migrate. So here is a picture of Concur, and this just evidences how the key accounting data is pulled from our Cezanne HR system and pushed through into the administration within the Concur system. From there, as I say, it manifests through BCD and ultimately ends up in the AirPlus billing data report, which you can see here. You can see the highlights at the top into the business areas. You can see how we've data sorted this by country. This gives us our accrual that we can pass out. But also, just slightly off middle to the right-hand side, you can see the more critical data, the authorization numbers that we use. If they're missing, then that becomes an HR issue. We do not refund anybody that's booked flights outside the system. It's a disciplinary issue. As I say, ultimately we hope to get to that same position with hotels, because what we want to do is people to actually work rather than spend their time doing bookings, etc. So today, we're pretty much automatic. We literally only have one person sitting in the shared service center that supports this. Everything is converted straight out of Concur, straight into SAP, and then we pay people as vendors from our SAP system. The responsibility of the AP clerks has completely changed. Their role now is to ensure that there's a receipt tip back. The receipt tip back needs to match what's obviously been indicated in Concur. We have the ability to reject it and send it back, and that's really our role now. We no longer do policy compliance through that vehicle. As I said to you earlier, we also use that same export pack to go into other ERP systems. This was important. We wanted to be relatively flexible to actually, because of the speed at which our AI team can work in getting it into SAP, we wanted the flexibility to be able to operate outside of it. AirPlus bill is notified literally as soon as I get in on the first of every month. I download that, I check it for sanity, and then either through Excel or CSV we can then export that into our systems. Very clean, very quick process, and then we use that, as I say, just to do a sanity check on policy compliance. Touched on it earlier, the affiliates get a month-end accrual, but outside of that they're only charged once a quarter. So across Europe, I'm happy to say we no longer enter any T&E into our SAP system manually. The trade-off is important. We require people to use the tool. What we don't want people is to go off on the web, spending lots and lots of time to prove they could get better. We don't need it. They don't want to be doing it. But ultimately, we want to be saving money. So the key is to ensure that the relevant content is in that system. So we spend now a lot of time working with Concur, working with HRS, working with key people to ensure that what the users see is as much choice and as much content as possible. What they want is speed of solution, and also what they want is to ensure that we get this central payment thing going where less and less is burdened on their cards. Frequency is something I touched on earlier, is that we've kept the same weekly payment processes. And the reason we've done that is an acknowledgement of the fact that if we're going to encourage people to actually claim once a month, that really needs to fit into their credit cards structure. So rather than actually sitting there saying everything has to be in by a certain date on a given month, we're only making one payment, it suits us to keep weekly. People work within that. As long as they get their original documentation through to us by Monday, they know that we paid on a Wednesday, it will be in their account on a Friday. For us, the simplification was critical. We want one Concur, one BCD, one Airplus. This has worked for us for 3 to 4 years. As I say, we've revisited the supplier base already, as we are prone to do as a strong procurement operation. And again, we've repeated we're quite happy with it as we stand at the moment. So from that point of view, that proves that this thing is working. Okay. Continuous improvement. Key is to ensure it's enjoyable. Yeah, this should not be an obstacle. This should be something that people want to use. We have had to, in the middle, to become a lot smarter on how travel market is changing. There are a lot of things, and I'll touch on it further down about open booking, where you've got multiple carriers getting involved, you can still save money. In Europe, it's not quite so prevalent, but it's an increasing situation whereby if we travel to China and the Far East, there is a difficulty in getting airlines to put content on Amadeus, which they're prone to just sticking on the web. We're having to be open-minded to that. We're having to look at open booking solutions, and again with Concur, we're looking to trial their open booking solution, which may or may not enable people to book off system, but then bring that in for reporting purposes and for approval purposes. It's very new, we're looking at it, we're testing it, but it's very hard to push back on these individuals that are trying to save us money. So we're having to become flexible about how we operate and whether we're going to absolutely resolutely stick to Concur as the means to book, and BCD is the means to book, but at the minute, the idea is to try and complement that. We've tried to simplify as much as possible. We continue to do so. The paying for hotels is an important step for us, but we're having to move step by step by step. HR remains slightly uncomfortable about the notion of paying for these, given hotels get cancelled. But again, it's an ongoing journey that we continue to look at. We assess what's been spent and whether we would actually lose money doing this, and the initial data thus far is very, very good. By looking at trip purpose and destination, we're changing habits. From an HQ perspective, way over two-thirds, getting on to 75%, is trips to the NEC office. As an organisation, we have 20 meeting rooms in this building, all of which have video conferencing facilities. So we're now pushing back on some of these things, and indeed everybody who puts in as a destination and a purpose visiting another NEC office, it goes to the CFO of the company. He sees it for every country that we've got. He will review it. He will decide whether that trip should carry on working. It's all forced us to look at incentivizing. We are looking at trying to encourage people to move same day, to actually take out the hotel piece. We're playing with trip allowances, with what we would make available for meals, etc. We're trying to find clever ways to encourage people not to go out the night before, spend money on hotels, and make it a two-day trip rather than one. We haven't got to gamification. I don't think we will, but I think what we're trying to do is use the data of travel, where that destination is, to get a lot smarter in trying to get people to do the right thing for the company. We want to reduce the number of, or the amount of time spent on T&E as possible. People have better things to do. As I say, the key is to meet that trade-off. We want people to use these tools. We want them to give us the strategic data to do better buying, but we want them to do that. We have to meet them halfway. Hence why we have a rather broad thing. As I say, basically once you've got an approval, you can go and spend up to £400 on any flight, and all we do is analyse to make sure it's not being rude. So I thought I'd conclude by offering a few hard facts as to what we've achieved. As you saw at the outset, we had about 9,500 expense claims. By changing that mindset, by stopping people to actually claiming event-driven and looking to do more period-driven, we've reduced it down by 3,500. That includes expanding the number of operations we're supporting. I mean, this is a massive change and proves that if we can take those lumpy items out, people are more inclined to work with us. The TMC costs at a transactional level have halved because people are booking it themselves. We have a very keen rate from the point of view of what the TMC will charge us per event. We know they're not marking it up. We know that the service they provide is well worth the money. And so on that two-third, one-third split between what's self-booking and what needs to be contacted, we're very, very happy with. The key driver for us, and the one that we hadn't really got our heads around, was this content return. By offering people so many different options, by getting them to search to look at the secondary airports and looking at the web carriers, etc., in year one net of tax, we actually managed to reduce our average ticket pricing by 43%. And this is a massive number for us. Travel approvals, as I say, this for me was my key driver. What I needed to do was to ensure that people could actually access and work to a timescale that suited them. We have now got travel approvals down to less than 1 day on average. Invariably, it's normally seconds and minutes. So from that, it's a massive step forward. It means that people are booking a lot earlier. It means we're getting cheaper flights. Expense approval used to be weeks. Sometimes it was months. The average approval time is now less than 3 days, again because of the mobile functionality. So we've moved from weeks to days and maybe in some instances hours. The hard returns, so basically there are no AP clerks doing expenses. They're all released now to do other more meaningful tasks. As I say, when that was your financial controller putting those into the system, that's quite tangible. The compliance, as you can see there, the manual management policy has very much been released and updated. SOCs are very happy with it. This is now fully signed off by our JSOCs team. It's fit for purpose. It's continually reviewed. We make sure that it works. We have to go through various hoops and jumps like works councils, etc. But it's fully documented, fully approved, fully signed off, and it works. And our manual environment, as I say, it's disappeared. 2/3 all flight bookings, as I say, are self-service. Hotels we need to work on. Now that we've got the content from HRF, we need to make that mandatory, and we're looking to improve that number there. Key was mobile adoption. It will always be mobile adoption. People can do it from their phones. The solution that we have is supported by so iPhone, BlackBerry, and Android are all supported. It means that people with their iPads, etc., etc. Managers now are tooled up with these tools. When they arrive in this organisation, because all of our P2P is covered by mobile, this is just one facet of what was actually the instigator. The management team are now very, very clued up to using mobiles, and this attachment with paper has gone. Managers used to measure themselves by how much paper they had in their in-basket when they returned. That, as a culture, has completely disappeared at NEC, which in a Japanese organisation is no mean feat. So the tools are now at a stage where they actually are fit what we consider to be a small and medium business. We've had the returns, as I say, from a financial point of view, we very much got our return a lot earlier than we thought. Stakeholders, anybody deploying these tools knows that it can't just be done by finance or by procurement or by HR. All these people need to come together. For us, the key was that people didn't enjoy it and therefore it was emotional. We had to get rid of that. And what we did do was spend a lot of time up front to localize it and make it feel as though that they had built it in the local countries. We very much use the third-party suppliers to drive the agenda. The changes we deployed were due to the fact that the tools were driving this change. So we avoided the conversation of what would you like. It was more a question of this is what you're going to get, how would you like it customized? And quite critically for us, and again just to lever on the AirPlus piece, their role moved from being a payment mechanism now to being a critical part of the control element, and certainly from the MI, it's a very big part of our operation. We've looked at other credit cards and what they can provide, and at the minute AirPlus remains way ahead of the field. So for us, AirPlus is a very strategic supplier. The key success factors is, to date, those same 4 operations or same 4 areas of HR, etc., all come together. We all meet as a team. We all review travel together. We all own it. The key was getting the key sign-off individuals to see the soft returns. Yes, they could see the AP heads going out, but they were also very, very open-minded. It was a relatively straightforward case of getting them to buy into this management time ethic. They were fed up with being plagued by their individuals saying this doesn't work for me. So it was a quick win for us and a good one. The only other thing was to actually spend the time going local. As I say, my colleague and I went to every one of these countries. We sat with individuals, and they felt like they were building it. They did the testing. They did the sign-off. They were involved with the deployment. That was important. As I say, we avoided the age-old problem of shared services enforcing themselves on those local organisations, and it worked. So that's our story. As I say, we've gone from an extremely manual environment to something of great automation. Hopefully it resonates with some. We've certainly used the reference site by many, and you're more than welcome to contact me if that is of interest. With that to hand, I'll hand back to Rachel.
Thank you, John, for what was an extremely informative session, and I hope that you can take something away from this. Before I close, I just wanted to finish off by telling you a little bit more about the Airplan Solutions and how they may possibly benefit your organisations. So NEC are using our company account, but as I mentioned in my introduction, we also have corporate cards for the on-the-road expenses and also an online reporting tool to help analyse all your data. So the ASF company account is the centrally billed account offering in-depth data for easier cost allocation as described by John. And as I mentioned before, T&E payment and analysis is all we do, so we really have to do it well, and as such our Lodge product is actually known as best in class in the market. One point I did also want to mention here was that as well as providing invoice files into your general ledger or finance system like SAP in the case of NEC, we also feed daily transaction files into an expense tool, so into individual expense claims, so that all the costs can be brought together per trip and also making the individual accountable for these costs even if they are paid centrally. The transactions can then be tied up to your general ledger, so the invoice file can be automatically reconciled. This is something that NEC do not currently do, but having spoken to John, they may consider implementing this in the future to further improve their processes. So we also have a virtual payment solution, widening the scope of the company account, the Lodge product, which means that also the Lodge product can be used for paying for all different types of travel services such as hotels, events, rail, basically anywhere where MasterCard is accepted. Our virtual payment solution, also known as IEDA, was the first in the market, and in many cases it is now integrated so that the whole experience for the user is actually seamless. So this slide here just shows the desktop version, just to give you an idea of how it actually works and the data that can be captured. So our award-winning corporate card based on MasterCard, the fact that we use our own processing system means that we can be flexible in our offering and can adapt our product far more easily when needed. We try to differentiate our offering by the ease of use of our administration tool and also the service offering for both the program administrators and also the card holders. The administration tool is all about putting you, the customer, in the driving seat, giving you the control. You can see cardholder spending in real time, make real-time changes to cardholder limits, cash accesses, etc. You can also run various reports such as delinquency reporting. Also, you can set up email alerts according to certain criteria, like cardholders taking out cash or making high-value purchases. Basically, you can choose these. And as I mentioned, we have tried to make service key to the whole offering, which is really helped by the fact that our local contact centre is actually at our office in West London, meaning that any issues that can get resolved really easily and very quickly. So finally, our online reporting tool gives you the in-depth analysis of all your spend. It basically works pretty much like a data warehouse, taking data from your corporate cards, the lodged accounts, TMCs, etc., allowing you to do endless reports. Many of them are just one-click reports, so you can really set up bespoke reporting to cover all your needs. So NEC are just one of the 40,000 clients using us today around the globe. The next slide just shows you a few others that also use us. So before I do close, I just wanted to finish off by telling you a little bit about some of the research we carry out, namely our annual international travel management study. In our latest study, a total of 2,101 interviews were conducted in 22 markets, and I just want to tell you about a few of the highlights from the UK market. So one of the trends that came out of the interviews we had with the UK travel managers was about the increase in the importance of meetings and incentives. 87% of UK travel managers believe spend on meetings will increase or stay the same in 2013. It's then really quite timely that we've actually just launched our event solution in the market to help corporates with their strategic meeting planning, and the feedback so far is very promising. So a new question in this year's study was whether travel managers felt that service providers work together in a professional capacity and coordinate with each other. Only 26% said that their service providers always or frequently collaborated professionally. It's the lowest figure for any country and well below the global average of 52%, so it's actually half under. One reason why this figure was so much lower for the UK could be that British companies have more complex travel programs than in other countries, leading them to require a higher degree of cooperation between different parties. This, as I said, this is a new question, so we will be monitoring the question further in the next year's study. So finally, the third trend that came out of the UK travellers, came out of the UK, was that UK travellers are some of the oldest in the world, with 22% of total travellers being 55 and over, which, by the way, I don't think is old at all, compared with China at the other end of the spectrum with just 6%. So this is maybe something just to bear in mind when looking at travel policies and duty of care. Just for your information, the travel management study will be available for downloading on our website at the beginning of June. So thank you for listening. I will now hand back to Susie West from Shared Service Centre.
Thank you very much indeed, Rachel. So just before we go into questions, I'd just like to close with our final poll coming up on your screen now, please. If you could just take a moment to answer that. To what degree do you think the efficiency of your T&E programme could be improved? To a high degree, a medium degree, a low degree, or do you believe that you're as automated and efficient as you can be? So just one choice there, please. As you know, we like to get about 70% of you responding, currently at about 55%, so if you haven't responded, please do so. Closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. Let's have a look at the results. It's 65% of you responding there. So we've got 30% of you thinking that saying to a high degree, 45% to a medium degree, and actually 5% of you believe that you are as automated and as efficient as you can be, so congratulations to that 5%. Let's move straight into questions. So a number of questions directed at you, please, John. Do you reimburse out of pocket via AP, i.e. do you set up an employee as a vendor, or do you reimburse via payroll?
No, it's, in all countries except for Scandinavia, we reimburse by SAP vendor account. So yeah, so basically, even for the non-travellers, the Concur tool is geared to actually recover expenses. That is part of the export file, goes into SAP and they're paid as vendors.
Okay. What is your process to clear terminated employee transactions?
Part and parcel of people departing the organisation. At the point of resignation, the HR team emails out to a number of various parties. One of those is ourselves as administrators in the middle. We then check for any cash advances initially, so we need to understand whether there's an exposure. And then secondly, we also look at we actually write the individual concern, ensuring that they actually send that through. The accounts do remain open in Concur for a period of at least 4 weeks after the event to sweep up any ones that will be later than the departure date.
Okay. And John, if an employee innocently misuses his or her card, how do you reimburse? How do they reimburse NEC?
Okay, we do not, as I say, we do not have corporate cards deliberately. Part and parcel of what we're trying to do is very much put everything on the lodge card. So we do not have cards where people incur the expense and then make it a problem for us after the event. So it's deliberately structured. It's probably archaic. It's probably not what everybody else wants to do. So from the point of view of people actually expensing, it's expensing it their own card, and then it's up to them to get that through and approved by their manager. So we kind of bypass that as a problem. Okay.
So multi-level approval of T&E is still required, regardless of the fact that it's automated. What is the actual time saver for the executive stroke management team?
The management team is being able to respond wherever they are on a handheld device. So from the point of view, in what we had previously was if it was over a certain value, it went to the line manager, then to a general manager, and potentially even to the CEO. What we've done is we've changed that. As I say, we've re-looked at some of these aspects and said, you know what, there's no added value of doing this. So for some, we've actually trimmed that back. So it's just one person. It may be the highest person in that chain. The only place that wants to continue with it is France, where they do have multi-levels. And again, then you're at the mercy of the individuals being available. But again, if you're an approver, most, if not all, have mobile devices. So as much as having multiple layers will delay it, the reality is that the turnaround time remains very, very quick.
Okay. How long did it? Could you talk to us a little bit about the project? And did you assign a project manager? If so, what was the background of that project manager? How long did the overall project take? And yes, those kinds of project questions. If you could just dig a little bit into that, please.
Basically, we split up into 4 component parts. We went with the UK operation first. That was the HQ operation, a UK business, which was our trading arm, and 2 other divisions. We went live with that. That first phase probably took us around about 4 to 5 months. After that, we then went with one of our biggest territories, which was Germany. They have 2 legal entities there. We wanted to address issues like works councils, etc., etc. That took us another 4 months after that. And then phases 3 and 4, we did 4 countries at a time. And they were basically per quarter, so every 3 months thereafter. So the initial wave was pretty much done in just over a year. As I say, since then we've been adding to it depending on what's being centralised.
And John, was that somebody project managing this as a full-time job? Was it a part-time job?
It was a part-time job, so effectively, because of the number of interfaces that were there, the project manager per se was somebody from our IT department that was acting as the coordinator. From the point of view of the project meetings and driver, that was myself. So, as I say, we had stakeholders at every one of those meetings. We had a typical project initiation document, etc. So it's very formal, very kind of Prince2 driven, but no, it's an internal resource. We have 2 or 3 internal resources that look after probably 2 or 3 projects at a time.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. We are out of time. So, John and Rachel, thank you so much for your input there. Fascinating story. Ladies and gentlemen, we have coming up in London in June our Source to Settle as a service event, so make sure that is in your diary. And a number of exciting webinars coming up over the next few weeks. Please go on to sharedserviceslink.com to find out more about dates. And we look forward to welcoming you next time. And goodbye.